Let's see, one from Stefanos Phoenix, and we sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but if a drummer doesn't know his stuff too well, do you push them to play better, or do you just edit their stuff in Pro Tools, and do you think that a better performance sounds better than great edits?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a dream to record a band that just comes in and kills it, and a great drummer is a joy to record and makes for a great record. I think with general rule of thumb for me when it comes to editing or really any sort of studio magic is you can only improve it one letter grade. So if somebody comes in and they give you a D performance, you can make it a C. If a C performance, you can make a B. And B, I don't know if you can make a B into an A, but maybe an A minus. And you can make an A into an A plus. So depending on what your goals are, I'll still edit a great drummer if that's what's the best thing for the song. And sometimes really bad drummers are really hard to edit, and you have to get it pretty deep into forensic audio. It's sort of like auto-tune. Auto-tune doesn't really work so well for singers that are way off. It's like someone has to be pretty close for it to work well and sound natural. I mean, unless you're going for the, that sort of Antoine Dobson kind of effect on, If you're auto-tuning the news, then and you want that sort of edited effect, that's one thing. But I find it, at least for my chops, I find it really difficult to perfect a poor performance, and I can improve it a little bit. But if someone's not a great drummer, what I'll do is, I'll try to embrace what is their strength, and maybe, maybe they're a real wild drummer, maybe, and actually the Iggy Pop had this sort of philosophy about the Stooges, which was and I think he was pretty heavily involved with a lot of their mixing, was to take the worst element of the mix and make it the loudest. Sometimes if you have something that's not so hot and you try to hide it, it actually sounds like you're trying to hide it. And it's actually better to put something kind of crappy way up front in the mix and make it look like you're trying to feature that and embrace the character of something less than perfect rather than try to disguise it.
An interesting note on that is so TuneTrack, with Easy Drummer, it comes with all these MIDI grooves that are recorded by actual drummers, that you can load in. They don't edit them at all. And if you look at those, there's a Gene Hoglan one who everyone calls the human clock or whatever.
Right.
If you look at that, it's not on the grid. The velocities are all over the place. It's not wildly off the grid, but it's not on the grid. So I think what people think is perfect and what they perceive to be and the mathematical reality of it are oftentimes two very different. Our ears and brains play a lot of tricks on us, and sometimes we hear things that are imperfect as more perfect.
I agree, absolutely, and I'll also add that it's impossible to separate our perception of music from from our sentimentality about music. So the music that we're raised on has dramatically affected the way that we hear all music in the future. And I just turned 40, so I'm coming of age in the 80s, and at the time listening to 80s music, but a lot of 70s music, and there was just the technology wasn't nearly what it is today. So I'm used to I was raised on more dynamic, less perfect records than kids who are young right now are raised on. And their experience of music and the music that they're raised on was quite a bit different than mine. So they're hearing probably music with less distortion, or maybe the distortion they're hearing is more like second order than first order. And they're used to hearing music that's more rigid, more beat detective, and they're raised with that, so they probably have a different filter for what is good than the filter that I have. I know Jesse Cannon talked about that a lot.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that.
Recording kids who are raised with digital recording versus kids who are raised with analog recording. They have a different perception of what good is, and I think as recording engineers, it's our task to know what is the goal of this recording and who is my audience, who is my client, and in order to make them happiness, and what will what will best represent their artistic vision? Is it that perfection, or is it that variation? Is it, is it distortion, or is it cleanliness?
Great. One from Sean Fitz, who's kind of noticed, Kurt, in a lot of videos in your studio, the guitarist is in the room with the drummer while tracking. Are they just playing along with an amp sim for the drummer to follow? And do you ever have a problem with noise from them being in the room?
Yeah, that is the case. Yeah, most of the time I'm using an amp sim. Lately I've been using the Kemper profiling amp, which is my favorite scratch track tool right now. I haven't really done a whole lot of real tracking with it, but it's great. It's certainly great for scratch tracks, and I don't have to worry about any issues of latency or hogging any resources in my main DAW. But you can do scratch tracks any different ways. It's really just a matter of coming up with something that makes the drummer comfortable, feel like they're interacting with another person, and have somebody to play with, and then also, especially if you're not tracking on a click, someone who's right there live with them to be malleable and adjust to what they're doing, and to provide them with feedback. So yeah, but then sometimes there are conflicts. I try to position whoever's out there playing scratch track away from any room mics and overheads. If they're strumming really hard, especially if there's like a little gap in the drummer's performance where they do a cymbal choke and there's just a guitar break, sometimes you get that in the overhead mics, and you might have to do a little editing on the overheads to get that out of there, or maybe you just enjoy that and want to embrace it and leave it in the mix. But yeah, sometimes you might want to ask them to play a little bit quieter, maybe not as aggressively as they usually do. And another nice thing about having a scratch guitarist that I use a lot is, let's say there is like a short guitar break like that. Instead of having the guitar player like play the riff during the guitar break in the middle of the song, I'll have the guitar player just go because it's usually easier for them to keep time with like a self-made click track than it is to follow like a distorted, fluid kind of guitar riff.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, if you have the option, if a drummer's really dialed with a click and well rehearsed with it, and they can play with the click or not, do you find that it's usually better to not play with the click or with the click for feel-wise and things like that?
Oh, that's totally like a case-by-case basis. And I usually, if we're not sure, just record it each way and then sort of take a vote. Like listen back to the performance and see what feels more exciting. Sometimes it's half and half. Sometimes we'll be like, hey, the verse and chorus feel great, but then by the time we get to the bridge, let's just take the click off and let the end of the song be a little bit more wild. It's totally case by case for that.
Oh, okay. Thought I saw a hand go up. Let's see. We've got one here from Toto, who blesses the rain down in Africa. Not sure if you heard. Do you ever sum two mics together when you're tracking drums, like the snare or kick drums?
Not typically on the way in. Oh, by the way, supposedly I'm related to people in Toto.
Oh, hey, there you go.
You do kind of have to look.
I don't know. Like my grandmother insists that they're like distant cousins of mine, but I don't know.
There you go.
They're cool, but
maybe this is your cousin asking the question.
Well, yeah, it totally depends on what your setup is, how many microphones and channels you have, how many inputs on your converters you have. My studio is pretty well equipped, and I have a lot of gear, so I'm able to keep that stuff separate on the way in. But when I was tracking primarily to tape, especially when I had like an 8-track and a 16-track, then I would combine that stuff down to one track. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but one of the reasons to keep it separate is if there is a, there will be a subtle offset in time between a top snare and a bottom snare mic. And same thing with like an inside kick, outside kick, or top and bottom tom mic. And sometimes that offset is cool and gives you a nice EQ effect, but other times you actually want to scoot some tracks around a little bit to line them up more, and you end up with can end up with a more pure sound that sounds less like the phase discrepancies you get from a lot of mics. Fewer mics. If you put 8 mics on a kit, you're naturally going to have fewer phase discrepancies than if you have 20 mics on a kit. But if you can take your top and bottom snare mic, scoot the bottom snare mic a little bit, and then sort of make that only one phase discrepancy from the snare as opposed to two phase discrepancies from the snare. That can help you out a little bit. So I like to keep all those things on separate tracks while I'm tracking. And then sometimes, and I'm going to talk about this more tomorrow also, but sometimes even within single tracks, I'll dupe a track inside Pro Tools and process the two tracks independently from each other, even though it's coming from the same source.